He was just a father trying to buy his son a birthday gift, a simple act of love that turned into a nightmare. One moment, he was smiling at the cashier, holding a small toy car. The next, police lights flooded the store, and rough hands forced him to the ground. Accused of using fake cash, he could barely process the words before cuffs tightened around his wrists. Strangers whispered. Cameras rolled. No one saw the truth behind the uniform he wore every day, or the power that name on his ID carried. But by the time they realized who he was, it was already too late. But first, please make sure to subscribe the channel and comment below from which city you are watching this video. Marcus Johnson had never asked for attention. A quiet, devoted father of one, he lived a steady life in the suburbs of Atlanta, balancing early morning runs, long shifts, and bedtime stories with his 7-year-old son, Elijah. After losing his wife years ago, Marcus made it his mission to give Elijah the kind of love that never wavered. He worked for the Department of Homeland Security, but to his neighbors, he was just the friendly single dad who always waved from the driveway. He carried himself with quiet dignity, the kind built from years of discipline and sacrifice. Weekends were their sacred time. Breakfast pancakes, laughter in the park, and small surprises that made Elijah's eyes light up. That morning was supposed to be another one of those moments. Marcus had slipped out early, planning to buy a toy car Elijah had been talking about for weeks. He tucked a few bills into his wallet, the same crisp notes he'd withdrawn from the bank the night before. The air felt calm, almost peaceful, as he walked into the store. No one there could have guessed what was about to unfold, how a single misunderstanding, born from bias and assumption, would turn a father's simple act of love into a national headline. The calm before the storm had already begun. The store was quiet that morning, just the hum of fluorescent lights and the soft shuffle of shoes on polished tiles. Marcus picked up the bright red toy car, running his thumb along its smooth edges. He could already see Elijah's face lighting up. He smiled, handed the toy to the cashier, and pulled out a crisp $50 bill. But the cashier hesitated. Her eyes flicked from the bill to Marcus's face, then to the small line forming behind him. She bit her lip, said nothing, and disappeared to the back. A few seconds stretched into minutes. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Something felt wrong. When she returned, 2 police officers trailed behind her. Their presence was heavy, commanding, suspicious. One of them, a tall man with a stern expression, approached Marcus slowly, hand resting on his holster. "Sir, we received a report of counterfeit money being used," the officer said, his tone firm. Marcus blinked, confused. "There must be a mistake," he wanted to explain, but before he could, one of the officers grabbed his wrist. The toy car dropped to the floor with a dull clatter. Shoppers stopped and stared. A woman whispered something, clutching her purse tighter. The other officer pulled Marcus's wallet from his pocket, rifling through it like evidence. His voice trembled, not from guilt, but from disbelief. "That cash came straight from my bank," he tried to say, but the words were drowned by the static of a police radio. Someone recorded on their phone. Another muttered, "Typical." Marcus's heart pounded as he was led outside, hands bound, the metal biting into his skin. Each flash of blue light burned into his memory. He wasn't thinking about the money anymore. He was thinking about his son. What if Elijah saw this on the news? What if the neighbors did? At the station, the humiliation deepened. They sat him in a cold room, asked the same questions over and over, ignoring every answer. His credentials, his ID badge, none of it mattered. They didn't even look closely enough to see the emblem of Homeland Security embossed in silver. Hours passed. The so-called fake bill was sent for verification. Marcus stared at the clock, each second a reminder of how fragile dignity could be when skin color spoke louder than truth. Then came the whispers outside the interrogation room. A clerk's hurried footsteps. A shift in tone. The door opened again, this time with hesitation. The officer's eyes darted to the file in his hand, then back to Marcus. The arrogance drained from his face, replaced by a kind of stunned disbelief. Marcus sat still, his body tense, heart pounding. Something had changed, but what? The officer cleared his throat, suddenly unsure. "Sir, we may have made a mistake." But that was an understatement. What they discovered in the next few moments wouldn't just clear Marcus's name. It would expose the very system that condemned him without question. And as the truth surfaced, the same hands that cuffed him would tremble in regret. The room fell silent as the officer slid the open folder across the table. Inside were Marcus's identification documents, his government clearance, his Homeland Security credentials, and years of spotless service records. The same man they dragged across a supermarket floor, humiliated before strangers, was one of the highest-ranking officials responsible for national security operations. The officer's face drained of color. The other cop, the one who'd cuffed him, stood frozen by the door, his breath catching in his throat. Every arrogant word, every dismissive glance replayed in his mind like a confession. Marcus didn't say a word. He didn't have to. His silence was louder than any accusation. He simply stared at the file, at the badges that should have protected him, but didn't. The truth was undeniable now, but came too late. The captain rushed in next, eyes wide, muttering apologies that sounded hollow in the sterile room. They unfastened the handcuffs, stammering excuses about procedural errors and miscommunication. But the damage was already done. The marks on Marcus's wrists were more than skin deep. Outside the interrogation room, whispers spread like wildfire. Officers stared, their expressions shifting from disbelief to shame. Cameras that had once captured his arrest now caught the stunned faces of those who judged him. Marcus rose from the chair, his movements slow, deliberate. The same man they had treated like a criminal now stood before them, a quiet symbol of everything they claimed to defend but failed to understand. He looked at them one last time, eyes steady and calm, and for a moment no one could meet his gaze. The air felt heavy with the weight of realization, how quickly perception could turn truth into guilt. Then, without a word, Marcus picked up his belongings and walked out of the precinct. Each step echoed through the hallway, not in anger, but in quiet power. They thought they'd arrested a suspect. They had instead exposed themselves. The news broke before Marcus even made it home. The story of a respected Homeland Security official wrongfully detained spread like wildfire, first across social media, then on every major network. Comment sections filled with outrage and disbelief. Some apologized, others deflected. But for Marcus, no apology could erase the memory of those cuffs, the eyes that saw only color, not character. He didn't hold a press conference. He didn't demand headlines. He returned to his quiet life, spending the next morning where he always found peace, making pancakes with Elijah, the sound of laughter softening the ache inside. Yet something in him had changed. What once felt like duty now felt like purpose. In the days that followed, messages poured in from people who'd lived the same story, ordinary black men and women, professionals, parents, students, each one carrying invisible bruises from being doubted, profiled, or dehumanized. Marcus began to speak quietly but firmly, using his position not to shame, but to teach. To remind others that behind every uniform, badge, or assumption lies a human being whose worth can't be measured by skin. He never sought revenge, he sought understanding. Because real justice, he knew, wasn't just about clearing his name, it was about changing a system built to break others like him. And as the world moved on to the next headline, his story lingered, a quiet mirror reflecting a truth too many still refused to see. How many more Marcus Johnsons must suffer before a wallet, a badge, or a simple act of love isn't met with suspicion? Sometimes the real crime isn't what's printed on the bill, it's what people choose to see when they look at the man holding it.